Hello students, how are you? Hope you are all well. So last day we have explained the scope of project management. So let's go to the next part of the project management. So as we have said that we have explained the scope of project management, next is the issue management. So what are the different issues during a project and how we can manage them? The issues are restraints to accomplishing the deliverables of the project. So issues are restraints means restrictions. What are the different restrictions or what are the different hindrance that comes across while working on the project? So some obstacles that come during the project are termed as the issues. So issues are typically identified throughout the project and logged and tracked through resolutions. Like suppose sometimes it may happen that during the project some supplier says they cannot supply the thing in time. So what is needed to be done? Then you have to look for some alternate suppliers so that the material can be delivered within a right period of time, and correspondingly the project can go on so that no delay can happen. As we have already said that more delay means more cost. So we have to think about the different issues that may crop up during the project. So issues are typically identified throughout the project means while implementing the project, some in different steps, some some obstacles come up and that may hamper the progress of the project. So you have to identify it in beforehand, and then only you can do the project within the right period of time, and logged and tracked through resolution. So whenever there is a issue, it has to be logged and track resolutions of the issues are to be needed. Now in this section of the plan of the following process are depicted. So what is needed to be done during the if issues are there. So where issues will be maintained and tracked. So means how the issues can be obtained or during the course of the project where the issues may appear. That kind of things may be previously noted down while planning the project. And then as the project progresses, you have to look whether the similar some obstacles, some loggerheads are coming up or not, and you have to be prepared before actually it appears in the project. The process for updating issues regularly. So if any issue comes up and how that may affect the progress of the project, that has to be kept in mind. And if that comes up, so beforehand actually it appears, actually it comes up, so you have to be ready so that the project progress does not hamper. Like like in some cases, if you are say during the implementation of project, if you are thinking that if it happens that you are delay, you are at the you are not progressing properly, and you are not keeping the time frame that you have already thought of the project, then sometimes maybe you have to look for extra labor, you have to employ extra labor to make the progress in such a way so that you can keep the time maintained, keep the time maintained. Then the process for updating issues regularly. Oh, in the system, in the planning part, if there any issue comes, so that has to be properly kept a record, and that has to be escalated. The process has to be escalated means you have to im- inform that to the boss, the project manager, and all the people concerned with the project, so they should know that what is being happening, and any kind of issues, any kind of problem that may crop up, may come up. So they have to be informed, and they can plan accordingly so that this issue may not creep in, and before it creeps in, this is can be avoided. And the vehicle by which team members can access documented issues means how the documented issues can be resolved before it appears. So those things have to be prepared beforehand. Some things while planning those things, those how the issues, if some issue comes up, how those issues can be solved, those things are previously to be kept in mind and properly documented if something happens. So what could be the alternate solution, alternate possibilities? As I have said, if some supplier cannot give the materials within proper time, then you have to look for alternate suppliers so that they can provide you maybe in a extra cost. Sometimes because of the issues, extra cost may have to be incurred. So that could be a part of the project. But this is, you have to look for the way how, if any kind of issues comes up, so you have to keep in mind how those issues can be resolved before it actually comes up. So you have to be prepared for that. And the next, so issues are already impacting the cost, time or quality, as we have said. So issues means it may happen that they can change the cost may be increased, the time could be increased because of the issue, some problems, some loggerheads, some laggards that is happening during the project. So those issues will already impact the costs. Okay, so we have completed the issue management part, and we have already explained how the issues affect the project. Then next, let's go to the cost management of a project. Now, what is cost management of a project? As we have said, one of the most important part of the project is cost, time, and quality. Are the cost, time, and scope are the three most important parts, and if you can maintain properly, then that will maintain the quality of the project. Now, what is cost management of the project? This process is required to ensure the project is completed within the approved budget. So what is the budget? What was the approved budget of the project, means what was the planned budget, and what are the corresponding corresponding activities are to be completed within that particular kind of cost that has been estimated for that particular activity. So to maintain the cost management, to maintain the cost of the project, you have to keep the resources in intact in mind, and resources are to be utilized in proper manner. Resources are to be utilized in optimum manner, to the best possible manner, so that the budget can be maintained and the resources can be also utilized. So what are the different resources that we talk about in case of a project? That are one of the most important resources, people. The people who will be working on the project, and you have to pay, you have to give the wages, and you have to properly maintain the people activity. And if the number of people is increased, the cost will also increase, and the budget will also increase. So one of the most important resources, people who will be working on the project, and they must work in a proper manner, proper coordinated manner, so that the cost can be managed. Next is the equipment. So what are the equipment that is required for the project? And the equipments are to be brought in within the period of time, and specific equipments need are you for costs are there to use the specific equipment. So to use specific equipment within the proper time, some cost is estimated for that. And if the equipments are used in a within period of time fully utilized, then the cost could be maintained. If it's if it is not utilized properly, then the time may be extended, and for that the cost may be extended, and thus the budget could not be maintained. And also the materials, how the materials are used, whether the materials are used properly. Say, think about a construction of your house or building. So some, for the construction of house, the kind of materials that are required are see, if you are making say two-story building and three rooms per floor, then correspond there is a, and the size of the rooms are already mentioned, and how the things are, the proper plan is there, uh, and then it is very easy to calculate the what kind of materials, what is the amount of materials that are required to make the two-story building, and accordingly it can be purchased, and accordingly the budget can be made, and accordingly it can be purchased. But uh, while while actually making the building, if the cost of the equipments change, or cost of the materials change, then the budget will also change. So you have to keep the things in mind, to keep the materials and also the people. If while making your home, if you have thought that you will be using say 20 people, and in actual if you have to use 25 people, then the cost will also increase. So cost managing means managing the resources, and also managing the quantities of the resources. How the quantities, that, as we have said, 20 people will be required, and instead of 20 people, if you are using 25 people, obviously you have to pay their wages, and you have to and the budget will increase, the cost will also increase. So also, if we in say, if that is same, whatever quantities of the resources that is being planned, that has to be maintained in a proper way, and if it is not maintained, then the budget will also increase, and the cost could not be managed. And the cost management include the following processes. One is the resource planning, then cost estimating, cost budgeting, and cost control. So what is the resource planning part? For a resource planning, first thing you have to think about is what are the resources that are required for the project, and you have to mention the resources, you have to jot down the resources that is required, and then what is the amount, what is the quantities of the individual resources that we have said in the previous. So these are the people, how many people, what are the equipments, what are the different types of materials that are required for the project to be completed. Then you have to estimate the cost. So if you are estimating, if you are, say, think about making the house again. So if you have thought, say, you require 20 people, and they will be working for say 3 months, or 90 days, and if the daily wage is for 20 people is uh, say 5,000. So 5,000 into 90 days, so 45,000 rupees is the estimated budget. But if the number of the people increase, then that cost estimation goes haywire. So if it becomes 25, so 5,000 rupees will not be sufficient to pay them. So you have to increase the money to pay the wages for them, and accordingly the cost will also be increased. So uh, and similarly the cost budgeting accordingly, all the equipment, material, resources, whatever is required, so you have to write it down and plan accordingly, and what is the corresponding cost, you have to make the budget. And while implementing the project, you have to control the budget, control the cost, and you have to maintain proper way, so that the resources are to be used in the and this particular graph shows the in y-axis there is cumulative value of the total budget of the project, and and the x-axis shows the time, and the curve is called the S curve. In the initial phase, there is not much cost initially, because most of the thing it is being used as the planning and organizing the project. So cost part becomes less, and then when the basic implementation or organizing or buying the raw materials and certain parts are done, certain resource acquisitions are done, then the cost becomes a little higher, and when you start implementing the project, the cost is becoming increase, and then it takes in the final phase, uh, it goes to the top. So at the beginning, the cost is initially the cost is really less, then it starts to increase, and ultimately, and in the final phase, the cost becomes more. So you have to keep the cost, keep the cost in control, keeping the S curve in mind, and see, this curve looks like the shape of S. The cost control curve has to be kept in mind while implementing the project cost. So cost management of a project is the process that is required to ensure the project is completed within the approved budget. So whatever the budget is approved for the project, so the it, the project has to be done in such a way, it has to the resources have to be maintained, it has to be utilized in such a way so that whatever the budget approved budget was there, that has to be done within the project, has to be required, it has to be ensured the project has to be done in such a way, it must be completed within that budget. And for that it requires resource planning, that is the physical resources, that are people, equipment, material, and what quantities are necessary for the project. So for a particular kind of project, what are the different types of resources required, and and the resources are required in what quantity. So those things have to be kept in mind, and every time it has to be monitored, every phase, every step, it has to be monitored, and so that what was the cost, whether the implementation is done properly or not, whether the cost is being as it is been planned, whether it is being done or not. So those things are to be kept in mind, and the budget estimates are to be done in properly, so that there is not much gap between the budget and the actual, and project actual means what is actually happening during the implementation, what you have estimated, and what is actual cost uh, that has been incurred during the project. So those things have to be kept in mind, so that there is not much gap. Maybe there is not much gap, and if there is a gap, so how you can minimize the gap, that has to be kept in mind, so that the cost can be controlled. So next we have uh, already completed the cost management part. So let's go back to the next important aspect of the project, that is project time management. As we have said time and again, that cost, time, and scope will ensure the quality. So project time is the next important aspect. So what is project time management? That means, as we have said, the different activities, a project is composed of several activities, and each activity is needed to be completed to complete the project. So, and each activity requires some time to complete. So, throughout the project, there are several activities, and all the activities are to be completed to complete the project. Now, how to use that idea? So we know there is something called network diagram or project network diagram, which gives you the uh, different precedence succedence relationship between the activities. So which which activities are to be completed first, which activities are to be completed after that, and how one activity is related to the other, and that That particular diagram or graphical representation is the network diagram, and network diagram is one of the important drawing a network diagram is one of the important aspect of the project management. So project time management, for project time management, what are the different requirements? Requires activity definition. So what are the different activities related to the project? You have to be clearly defined. Also includes activity sequencing, as I was saying, in what are the which activity has to be sequenced after which activity. Activity can only start if all the previous related activities are already completed. And then you need to estimate the activity duration, how much time is required to complete a particular activity. And then the elaborate schedule activities, how one of the activities are related to the other, and how the sequentially all the activities can be clubbed in such a way so that there will be a graphical way of representation. And through that we can use the uh, CPM or PART, that is critical path method or project evaluation and review techniques to find out the critical paths and critical activities, because critical path and critical activities will decide what will be the estimated time for the project. We will be discussing that in a later stages, but for the time being, let's just use the terms critical path and critical activity. We will maybe we'll discuss it a little bit later. So activity duration model, if this particular graph shows the activity duration model. Initially the possible durations are shorter, and probability of occurrence are higher. If the probability of occurrence are higher, then in case of part of program evaluation review technique, which is the probabilistic model, or most real life in most real life problems are probabilistic model oriented, where there are three different times are used for a particular activity to estimate the activity time. But here we are not discussing the uh, part or CPM, but just trying to explain how project time management is important for the project. As we have said, time means money. Time is money. So more time for the project requires more money to complete. If it happens that more time is required to complete the project, then that will require more money to complete. So activity definitions are important. It also include how the activities are sequenced. So for that, so what are the estimates of activity duration? What for each activity? What are the resources have to be specified clearly, and how the resources can be utilized, and what are the corresponding time which resources are required for such activity. So while duration, while planning, you may be writing it down, you may be jotting it down, the requirements, but while implementing, there may be some difficulties uh, during the actual implementation. Then activity duration or activity work effort are the what are the requirements for an activity, how much time is required to complete a particular activity. Some activities like takes a longer time than expected, like authorization, like as I was giving example, that making your own house. So to make your own house, you have to draw a plan and pass the plan from either from municipality or municipality, and it may take a little bit more time. uh, if you are doing it yourself, maybe whatever the estimated time was there may not be sufficient to get the work done. So getting authorization, transportation time, supplying from whenever something is dependent on others, those estimates may vary, and sometimes those time estimates may cause you problem, and that may halt your work, and thus your if the work is halted, then the cost will also increase. Then the elaborate schedule of activities, like there are many software tools nowadays like MS Project, Net Chart, Part Chart, and all those tools helps you to decide what is the critical paths and what are the critical activity, what could be the expected duration of the project. So to do the jobs in a proper, well maintained, well sequential manner, this these tools help us, and this tool will make us help us to schedule our activities, sequence our activities, and do our job according the cost can be estimated, and while implementation we can check whether the proper planning, whether the work is going according to the proper planning or not. And say there are different, as we are saying, how which activity is related to what activity. So this particular diagram shows how activity A is related to activity B is related to activity A. Means here it means unless activity A is completed and the activity B cannot be completed. So finish to start, the initiation of work of the successor depends upon the completion of the work of the predecessor. So unless the predecessor's preceding job is completed, next job, the succeeding job cannot be started. Uh, finish the completion of the work of the successor cannot finish until the completion of the work means the successor cannot finish until the completion of the work of the predecessor. Then there are several ways of logical relationships are there. So we are not discussing that here. Maybe when we discuss CPM and part in an elaborate manner, then we will be discussing those things. And there are different types of logical diagram. Uh, this is a precedence diagram, and this is the arrow diagram where the nodes are the, in case of CPM and part, we mostly use this arrow diagram where activities are between the nodes, and activities has duration, and nodes are instances. So those can be explained in an elaborate manner when we will be discussing the part and CPM in an elaborate manner. And also there will be float and critical path. We will be discussing what is a critical path. Critical path means the path that consisting of several activities from start to finish. Those activities cannot be delayed, and if you delay the critical activities which is there in the critical path, you will delay the project, and that will mean there will be more cost of the project. So here we are not discussing those things because those are more mathematical, and we'll be using the example for that. Now how project time can be managed can be seen from this particular project planning cycle, that when the enterprise goals and objectives are there to implement a particular kind of project. So initially there is a plant initial concept to the project executors, and then the detailed designing is done, then quotation evaluation of the work orders. So and initial concept and planning are related, and initial concept and estimating and evaluation, and each every step, see, you can see here control of time to the left and control of cost to the right. So those two are the most important aspect of the project. So if you can control the time and then you can control the cost. So cost and time are the two two faces of the same coin. If you can control the cost, or if you can control the time, and you can control the cost, and in each and every step you just refer back and check whether the planned time was being implemented, and planned whatever was planned during the implementation. You just check, refer back what was planned, and whether you were following according to the plan, so that you can maintain the cost. So cost of control of time and control of cost are the two different faces, two different aspects of the same coin. So that's let's so those three important things that we have discussed, that is three triple constant: time, cost, and scope are the three important edges of a triangle, and that ensures the quality that we have already discussed. And next we will discuss the quality in the next phase.